We all know the official story of how the Great Pyramid was built, but something about it just doesn't add up. We're told that ancient Egyptian workers, with little more than copper tools and immense willpower, somehow lifted millions of stone blocks into a perfect, mind-boggling structure. The story sounds true, authoritative even, but something deep in your gut whispers that you're not getting the whole story. You're not alone in that feeling. The story begins not with ancient pharaohs or mysterious builders, but with a Victorian gentleman having what you might generously call an expensive midlife crisis. In 1837, Colonel Howard Vyse stood before the Great Pyramid with a crew of workers, a substantial fortune burning a hole in his pocket, and enough gunpowder to level a small village. His previous archaeological expeditions had yielded nothing but rubble and harsh criticism from anyone who cared about historical preservation. Picture the scene. A desperate man in colonial dress, his reputation hanging by a thread, standing before the world's most mysterious monument with the kind of tools that would make modern archaeologists weep. The pressure was mounting. His credibility was evaporating faster than morning mist in the desert sun. He needed a discovery, and he needed it desperately. Then, almost miraculously, his workmen made a breakthrough that would change everything. In a previously sealed chamber high within the pyramid's core, they discovered something extraordinary: red-painted hieroglyphs bearing the cartouche of Pharaoh Khufu. Suddenly, the entire mystery of who built the Great Pyramid was solved. Case closed, history books written, academic careers secured. But here's what might keep you staring at your ceiling tonight. This single discovery, made under rather convenient circumstances by a man whose entire reputation depended on finding something significant, has become the cornerstone of everything we believe about the Great Pyramid. Every textbook, every documentary, every confident tour guide bases their certainty on Colonel Vyse's dramatic find. And that's where our journey into reasonable doubt begins. These hieroglyphs tell a fascinating story, though perhaps not the one orthodox archaeology would prefer. Unlike every other royal inscription found in Egyptian monuments, these weren't carefully carved into stone with the reverence befitting a divine pharaoh. Instead, they appear to have been hastily painted with red ochre, the ancient equivalent of spray paint. Imagine discovering graffiti under a highway overpass that says Napoleon was here and using it to date the entire interstate system. Modern analysis of these markings raises uncomfortable questions that mainstream Egyptology prefers to sidestep. The paint appears fresh, applied in haste, with several spelling errors that would have horrified any self-respecting ancient Egyptian scribe. One cartouche actually misspells Khufu's name. It's exactly the kind of mistake you'd expect from someone copying hieroglyphs from a reference book, not from royal scribes documenting their god-king's eternal resting place. These inscriptions show none of the aging, fading, or dust accumulation you'd expect from artwork that supposedly predates the Roman Empire by 2 millennia. They look remarkably fresh for something that should be older than written history in most of the world. Dr. Scott Crichton, who has extensively studied these markings, noticed something particularly troubling. The hieroglyphs appear to have been painted over existing quarry marks on the stones, suggesting they were added after the blocks were already in place. This is roughly equivalent to finding someone's signature painted over a manufacturer's label on a car engine and concluding that person built the entire vehicle. None of this proves the inscriptions are forgeries, of course, but it does raise the rather obvious question of why humanity's greatest architectural achievement hangs its entire attribution on evidence that would barely hold up in traffic court. When pressed on these points, orthodox Egyptologists tend to shift uncomfortably and deploy what they call contextual dating. The logic works like this. We know the Great Pyramid was built during the 4th dynasty because it sits near other pyramids that were built during the 4th dynasty. Suggest that perhaps the Great Pyramid might predate the others, and you'll find yourself on the receiving end of academic scorn typically reserved for people who believe in flat Earth theories. This contextual dating has become so entrenched that questioning it feels almost heretical, which is usually a warning sign in any field that claims to value evidence-based inquiry. The real problem isn't just the logical flaws in this reasoning. It's how this assumption prevents us from considering alternative possibilities that might better explain what we're actually looking at. If the Great Pyramid were actually much older than the 4th dynasty, then what we see at Giza isn't a single massive construction project, but potentially a combination of ancient monuments and later additions. The newer pyramids might have been built around an existing structure, creating the appearance of contemporaneous construction when the reality could be far more complex. This isn't wild speculation. It's exactly what we see in countless other archaeological sites around the world, where later civilizations built upon, modified, or claimed credit for earlier monuments. But at Giza, this possibility is dismissed almost automatically, not because the evidence rules it out, but because it doesn't fit the established narrative. The dating problems become even more intriguing when we examine the attempts to use carbon dating to settle the question once and for all. In 1984, a team led by Mark Lehner collected organic materials from the pyramid's mortar and subjected them to radiocarbon analysis. The results seemed to vindicate orthodox positions, showing dates clustering around 2500 BC, right in line with Khufu's supposed reign. Problem solved, right? Well, not quite. The issue with carbon dating the Great Pyramid isn't the technology itself, which is remarkably reliable when properly applied. The problem is what we're actually dating. Radiocarbon analysis can only work on organic materials: wood, charcoal, plant fibers, bone. It cannot date the massive limestone and granite blocks that form the pyramid's structure. What the 1984 study actually dated were tiny fragments of organic material found in mortar between some stones. This creates an obvious problem that somehow gets glossed over in most discussions. Mortar might tell us about repairs and maintenance, not original construction. Every ancient monument undergoes centuries of restoration work, replacement of damaged sections, and addition of new elements. Dating mortar samples is a bit like carbon dating the caulk around your bathroom tiles and concluding that your entire house was built last Tuesday. The sample sizes in the 1984 study were also troublingly small, often just a few grams of material collected from scattered locations throughout the massive structure. Drawing conclusions about the pyramid's construction date from such limited samples is roughly equivalent to determining a forest's age by carbon dating a handful of fallen leaves. Even more problematic is the issue of contamination. Over thousands of years, the pyramid has been exposed to countless sources of newer organic material: plant growth, insect activity, human presence, and extensive restoration work. Each of these can introduce younger carbon into samples, skewing dates toward more recent periods. It's notoriously difficult to isolate truly original organic material from such an extensively contaminated environment. Perhaps most tellingly, the 1984 study found significant variations in dates from different areas of the pyramid, with some samples yielding ages several centuries apart. Rather than suggesting multiple construction phases or complex dating issues, these discrepancies were largely dismissed as noise in the data. This is a bit like finding different serial numbers on car parts and deciding they're all typos rather than evidence that the vehicle was assembled from components made at different times. When independent researchers have attempted to replicate or expand upon the 1984 carbon dating results, they've encountered something interesting: access restrictions. Getting permission to extract new samples for dating has proven remarkably difficult, with Egyptian authorities citing concerns about damaging the monument. While preservation is certainly important, it's curious that such restrictions apply most stringently to research that might challenge established timelines. Just when the dating controversy couldn't get more complicated, along came the Dixon relics to completely upset the apple cart. This is where our story takes a turn from merely suspicious to genuinely mind-bending. In 1872, British engineer Wayneman Dixon and his friend Dr. James Grant were exploring the Queen's Chamber when they noticed something odd. Unlike the King's Chamber, which had obvious air shafts leading to the outside, the Queen's Chamber appeared to have no ventilation at all. But Dixon suspected something wasn't quite right. Following barely perceptible air currents and suspicious-looking cracks in the walls, he decided to grab some tools and start chiseling. What Dixon found changed everything, though it would take nearly 150 years for anyone to fully appreciate the implications. Hidden behind the chamber walls were two narrow shafts, and inside the northern shaft, Dixon discovered three curious objects: a small granite ball, a bronze hook, and a piece of cedar wood fashioned into what appeared to be a measuring rod. Two of these objects, the hook and the ball, eventually made their way to the British Museum, where they sat in relative obscurity for more than a century. The wooden piece, however, took a more circuitous route. It remained in Dr. Grant's personal collection until his daughter donated it to the University of Aberdeen in 1946. Then, in the way that academic institutions sometimes misplace things, it disappeared into storage and was promptly forgotten. Fast forward to 2020, when curatorial assistant Abir Aladini was sorting through old collections and stumbled upon a dusty cigar box labeled with Egypt's old flag. Inside, wrapped in newspaper, was a small piece of cedar wood that would soon rewrite everything we thought we knew about the pyramids' age. The wood was sent for radiocarbon dating, and the results were nothing short of explosive. Instead of dating to around 2500 BC during Khufu's supposed reign, the cedar fragment returned dates of 3341 to 3094 BC, placing it some 500 to 800 years older than mainstream archaeology claims the pyramid could possibly be. Orthodox Egyptologists scrambled to explain this inconvenient finding. The most common argument suggests that cedar wood can live for hundreds or even thousands of years. So perhaps this piece came from the heartwood of a very ancient tree that was already centuries old when it was used in the pyramid's construction. It's a creative hypothesis, but it raises more questions than it answers. If the Dixon relics truly date the pyramid's construction to the 4th millennium BC, then the Great Pyramid predates not just Khufu, but the entire 4th dynasty. It predates the supposed invention of writing in Egypt. It predates the unification of Upper and Lower Egypt under the first pharaohs. In fact, it pushes the pyramid's construction back into what archaeology considers prehistoric Egypt, a time when the region was supposedly populated by simple farming communities with no knowledge of monumental architecture. Perhaps the most telling aspect of the Dixon relic discovery isn't the carbon dating itself, but the response from the archaeological establishment. You might expect such a significant finding to generate intense research interest, heated academic debates, and immediate calls for additional testing and verification. Instead, the response has been remarkably muted. The discovery has been largely ignored, dismissed with hand-waving about old wood, or simply not discussed in most academic circles. What's particularly frustrating is that we could easily resolve these questions with additional testing. There's still wooden material inside the pyramid shafts, clearly visible in footage from robotic explorations that could provide additional dating samples. Yet access to conduct such research is routinely denied. Standing at the end of our exploration into the pyramid's dating controversies, we're left with a picture that looks nothing like the confident certainty presented in textbooks and documentaries. The foundation of everything we believe about when the Great Pyramid was built rests on Victorian graffiti of questionable authenticity, carbon dating of repair materials rather than original construction, and institutional resistance to evidence that challenges established timelines. The pattern here isn't scientific inquiry, it's intellectual protectionism. When evidence supports the orthodox narrative, it's embraced and extensively studied. When it raises uncomfortable questions, it's dismissed, explained away, or simply ignored. This isn't how science is supposed to work, and it certainly isn't how we should approach one of humanity's greatest monuments. But the dating controversy is just the beginning of our journey into the Great Pyramid's mysteries. Even if we accept the textbook claim that this monument was built by Pharaoh Khufu around 2580 BC, we're immediately confronted with an even more perplexing question. Exactly how did Bronze Age workers accomplish engineering feats that modern machinery still struggles to replicate? Let me start with some numbers, because sometimes the simplest mathematics can be the most devastating to comfortable assumptions. The Great Pyramid contains approximately 2.3 million stone blocks, with an average weight of about 2.5 tons each. But averages can be deeply misleading here. While many blocks fall into that 2 to 3 ton range, others are substantially more massive. The granite blocks forming the King's Chamber weigh between 25 and 80 tons each. Some of the limestone blocks in the lower courses tip the scales at over 15 tons. If we accept the orthodox claim that this monument was completed in 20 years, we can perform some rather sobering arithmetic. 2.3 million blocks divided by 20 years equals 115,000 blocks per year. Divide that by 365 days, and you arrive at roughly 315 blocks that would need to be quarried, transported, lifted, and precisely positioned every single day for 2 decades straight. That's more than 1 block every 5 minutes, assuming work continued 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with no breaks for religious holidays, no days lost to weather, no time off for exhausted workers, and absolutely no mistakes requiring rework. The logistics alone should make anyone pause and reconsider what we're being asked to believe. But even these staggering numbers don't capture the full scope of the challenge, because not all blocks were created equal. Moving a 2-ton limestone block is difficult enough with Bronze Age technology, but it remains theoretically possible with enough people and proper technique. Moving an 80-ton granite block, however, enters an entirely different realm of impossibility. To put this in perspective, modern construction projects consider anything over 50 tons to be a heavy lift, requiring specialized equipment and months of preparation. The largest crane-lifted objects in today's construction industry rarely exceed 100 tons, and those operations demand computer modeling, precise weather conditions, and equipment that costs millions of dollars. Yet we're asked to believe that ancient Egyptians routinely handled 80-ton blocks as part of their daily construction routine. The transportation logistics become even more mind-bending when we consider the journey these materials had to make. Some of the granite used in the pyramid's internal chambers was quarried at Aswan, more than 500 miles south of Giza. This means these massive blocks had to be extracted from solid bedrock, loaded onto boats, transported hundreds of miles down the Nile, unloaded at Giza, moved to the construction site, and then lifted hundreds of feet into the air to their final positions. Each step of this process would have been extraordinarily challenging with ancient technology. Extracting 80-ton blocks from granite quarries without explosives or power tools would have taken months per block. Loading them onto wooden barges without cranes would have required engineering solutions that no known ancient civilization possessed. Transporting them hundreds of miles without modern navigation or weather forecasting would have been worthy of its own monuments. In 1978, a team of Japanese researchers decided to settle these questions once and for all by building their own pyramid using authentic ancient techniques. They planned a modest 20-meter-tall structure, a fraction of the Great Pyramid's original 146-meter height, and recruited 100 Egyptian workers to provide traditional construction knowledge. With modern organizational skills, unlimited budgets, and the benefit of knowing exactly what they were trying to achieve, the project should have been straightforward. It was anything but. The first problem emerged immediately. Cutting stone blocks using copper chisels and stone hammers proved so time-consuming and inefficient that the project timeline became absurd. After days of continuous work, teams of skilled workers could barely produce a single block of acceptable quality. At this rate, building even their modest pyramid would have taken several decades rather than the planned few months. Faced with this reality, the Japanese team made their first compromise. They reduced the target height from 20 meters to 10 meters, cutting the required stone blocks by roughly 75%. Even with this dramatic reduction in scope, the stone cutting phase continued to fall impossibly behind schedule. Eventually, the team abandoned authentic techniques altogether and began using power saws to cut their blocks. The transportation phase proved equally problematic. Ancient Egyptian boats reconstructed using traditional techniques and materials simply couldn't handle the weight of stone blocks without structural failure. The team had to resort to modern cargo vessels to move their materials. Even with contemporary boats, loading and unloading the blocks required modern cranes and heavy equipment. The final assembly phase required abandoning any pretense of authentic construction methods. Despite having blocks that were 1/4 the planned weight for 1/20th the height, the team needed modern cranes to lift stones into position. When even this proved insufficient for the upper levels, they brought in a helicopter to complete construction. The Japanese experiment, intended to vindicate orthodox theories about ancient construction methods, instead demonstrated their complete impossibility. A team with modern organization, unlimited resources, and the benefit of contemporary engineering knowledge couldn't build even a tiny pyramid using supposedly ancient techniques. Yet we're asked to believe that Bronze Age Egyptians built a structure 50 times larger using methods that defeated modern experts. The scale and transportation challenges, daunting as they are, pale in comparison to what engineers call the precision problem. It's one thing to move massive blocks. It's something else entirely to place them with the kind of accuracy displayed throughout the Great Pyramid. This precision isn't just impressive, it defies explanation using known ancient techniques. Start with the foundation, which spans more than 13 acres and is leveled to within less than an inch across its entire surface. This kind of precision requires not just careful construction, but sophisticated surveying techniques to ensure accuracy over such a vast area. Modern construction achieves this flatness using laser leveling systems and computer-controlled grading equipment. How Bronze Age Egyptians accomplished the same result using string lines and wooden stakes remains a complete mystery. The blocks themselves display precision that would challenge contemporary stonemasons. The joints between blocks are so tight that you literally cannot insert a razor blade between them. These weren't rough-cut stones forced into a proximate position. They were shaped to tolerances that would impress modern machinists, and this precision extends throughout the entire structure. Virtually every stone in the pyramid fits with the same extraordinary accuracy. The consistency of this precision suggests manufacturing processes rather than hand craftsmanship. When you examine the granite blocks in the internal chambers, the mystery deepens further. Granite ranks among the hardest stones on Earth, containing quartz crystals that can shatter steel tools. Working granite to precise tolerances requires diamond-tipped cutting equipment and carbide steel machinery. Yet the granite blocks in the King's Chamber display finish quality that rivals modern machine work. Christopher Dunn, a precision machinist who has extensively studied the pyramid's stonework, discovered evidence of techniques that shouldn't have existed in the ancient world. Core samples from granite blocks show spiral striations consistent with high-speed rotary drilling, the kind of marks left by diamond core drill bits spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. These aren't rough, irregular holes you'd expect from copper chisels and stone hammers. They're perfectly round holes with smooth walls and consistent diameters that speak to mechanical precision far beyond Bronze Age capabilities. Even more puzzling are the saw marks found throughout the structure. Some blocks show evidence of cuts made with blades that must have been at least 9 feet long, slicing through solid granite in single passes. The kerf marks left by these cutting blades are too narrow and too straight to have been made by copper saws, even if such massive blades could have been manufactured and kept sharp enough to cut granite. Orthodox archaeology's standard explanation for this precision stonework relies heavily on the copper chisel and stone hammer theory. According to this narrative, ancient Egyptian workers painstakingly shaped each block using these simple tools, achieving impossible precision through patience and skill alone. It's a romantic notion that appeals to our admiration for ancient craftsmanship, but it fails spectacularly when subjected to practical testing. Copper, while useful for many ancient applications, is simply too soft to effectively cut granite. When a copper chisel strikes granite, the copper deforms rather than the stone. Modern experiments with authentic copper tools have consistently demonstrated that while these implements can slowly chip away at limestone, they're virtually useless against harder stones. Dr. Dennis Stocks, an experimental archaeologist who has spent years testing ancient stone-cutting techniques, found that copper chisels could cut limestone at a rate of about 4 millimeters per hour under ideal conditions. This means that cutting a single granite block to the dimensions found in the King's Chamber would have required hundreds of hours of continuous work, assuming the chisels could cut granite at all. The tool degradation problem makes these numbers even more optimistic than they appear. Copper chisels become dull and deformed after only a few dozen strikes against hard stone. Each chisel would need to be removed, reforged, sharpened, and returned to work multiple times during the cutting of a single block. The constant tool replacement would have slowed progress to an absolute crawl and required a massive infrastructure for tool manufacturing and maintenance. Even if we generously assume that ancient Egyptians had unlimited patience and unlimited copper chisels, the precision problem remains unsolved. Hand tools, no matter how skillfully used, cannot achieve the dimensional accuracy displayed in the pyramid's stonework. The human eye cannot detect variations of fractions of millimeters, and the human hand cannot control cutting tools to such fine tolerances. There's another problem that orthodox explanations struggle to address: the complete absence of soot evidence. Working inside the pyramid's chambers and passages would have required artificial lighting for thousands of hours. Yet examination of interior surfaces shows no trace of soot, smoke stains, or other evidence of torch or oil lamp use. The walls and ceilings remain remarkably clean, showing no signs of the carbon residue that would inevitably accumulate from flame-based lighting systems. This absence suggests either that the pyramid builders had access to non-flame lighting systems, or that interior work was accomplished using techniques that didn't require continuous artificial illumination. Neither possibility fits comfortably with Bronze Age technology and construction methods. Some archaeologists have suggested that ancient workers used polished bronze mirrors to reflect sunlight into interior passages, eliminating the need for flame-based lighting. While ingenious, this explanation fails to account for the complex geometry of the pyramid's internal structure, which would make mirror-based lighting systems extremely difficult to implement and maintain throughout the construction process. The impossibilities accumulate so quickly that they eventually point toward an uncomfortable conclusion. The Great Pyramid displays evidence of engineering capabilities that Bronze Age Egypt simply could not have possessed. Rather than representing the pinnacle of ancient achievement using primitive tools, the monument appears to be the product of sophisticated technology that mainstream archaeology refuses to acknowledge. Recent electromagnetic surveys have detected unusual electrical properties within the pyramid's structure. The combination of limestone, an electrical insulator, and granite, a conductor, creates what appears to be a sophisticated electrical system. While we don't fully understand the purpose of this electrical engineering, its existence provides yet another line of evidence for advanced capabilities. As evidence for sophisticated engineering continues to accumulate, the response from orthodox archaeology has become increasingly defensive. Rather than embracing new discoveries that might expand our understanding of ancient capabilities, the establishment has doubled down on explanations that become more implausible with each new finding. Research that might reveal the true engineering capabilities of the pyramid builders is systematically blocked, ensuring that uncomfortable discoveries remain hidden from public scrutiny. This pattern of suppression extends beyond just the Great Pyramid to other Egyptian monuments that display similar engineering anomalies. But perhaps the most telling evidence for advanced capabilities is the complete absence of failed attempts or practice runs in the archaeological record. If Bronze Age Egyptians really developed pyramid building capabilities from scratch, we should find evidence of their learning process. Smaller pyramids with obvious mistakes, experimental techniques that didn't work, construction failures that were abandoned and rebuilt. Instead, we find the Great Pyramid standing alone, perfect on the first attempt, displaying engineering capabilities that supposedly took thousands of years to develop but left no evidence of that development process. It's as if the builders appeared out of nowhere with fully formed advanced capabilities, built their masterpiece, and then vanished, leaving behind only the mystery of how they accomplished what should have been impossible. This absence of a developmental timeline isn't just suspicious. It suggests that the pyramid's builders inherited their capabilities from an even earlier source. Advanced engineering abilities don't appear overnight. They require generations of experimentation, refinement, and accumulated knowledge. The fact that we see no evidence of this development process hints that we may be looking at something far older and more mysterious than conventional history acknowledges. The engineering impossibilities we've uncovered lead us naturally to an even more disturbing question. If the ancient Egyptians didn't build the Great Pyramid with copper chisels and unlimited determination, then what exactly was this monument designed to do? Because once you step inside the structure itself, the tomb theory begins to crumble faster than thousand-year-old papyrus. Picture yourself walking through the narrow passages into what archaeologists confidently call the King's Chamber. You're expecting to find evidence of pharaonic burial, hieroglyphic texts celebrating Khufu's journey to the afterlife, ornate decorations befitting a god-king's eternal resting place. Instead, you encounter something deeply unsettling: absolute emptiness. The chamber contains exactly one object: a granite box with no lid, no inscriptions, and no decoration of any kind. The walls surrounding this lonely container are completely bare. Not a single hieroglyph, not one painted scene, not even the simplest decorative element. In a culture that covered every available surface with religious texts and artistic imagery, this absence isn't just unusual, it's unprecedented. It's as if someone built the most elaborate cathedral in history and forgot to include any crosses, stained glass windows, or religious symbols whatsoever. The contrast becomes even more jarring when you compare this stark emptiness to how ancient Egyptians actually buried their pharaohs. When Howard Carter first peered into Tutankhamun's burial chamber by candlelight in 1922, his famous first words were "wonderful things," not "empty room" or "mysterious granite box." The tomb was so packed with grave goods that it took Carter's team nearly a decade just to catalog and remove everything. We're talking about over 5,000 individual objects crammed into a relatively modest burial space. Golden thrones, precious jewelry, ornate furniture, ceremonial weapons, board games for entertainment in the afterlife, perfume bottles, and yes, even royal underwear. Even relatively minor nobles received elaborate burial preparations. The tomb of Ramose, a vizier under Amenhotep III, contains stunning paintings depicting the deceased's life and detailed religious texts. The tomb of Seneb, a court dwarf, includes beautiful artwork celebrating his achievements. These were civil servants, yet they received more elaborate burial preparations than what we find in the supposed tomb of the mightiest pharaoh of the 4th dynasty. The granite box itself presents its own puzzles. It's slightly too large to fit through the entrance passage, meaning it had to be installed during construction rather than brought in later with a royal burial. This suggests the chamber was designed around the box, not the other way around. But if it was meant to hold Khufu's mummy, where are the ceremonial objects that should accompany such an important burial? The Queen's Chamber, despite its name, shows no evidence of ever housing royalty or anyone else. Like the King's Chamber, its walls are devoid of decoration or text. There's a curious niche in one wall that might have held a statue, but if so, both statue and evidence of its existence have vanished without explanation. Most telling of all is what archaeologists haven't found, despite more than a century of intensive exploration. Any evidence that anyone was ever buried anywhere in the pyramid. Not just no evidence of Khufu, no evidence of any burial at all. The entire structure appears to have been as empty on the day it was completed as it is today. This creates what historians call the prestige paradox. The greater a pharaoh's earthly power and wealth, the more elaborate his burial preparations should have been. Khufu, as the supposed builder of humanity's most impressive monument, should have received the most elaborate burial in Egyptian history. Instead, he apparently chose minimalism so extreme it would make modern Scandinavian designers jealous. Orthodox explanations for this paradox tend to be remarkably creative. Some suggest that tomb robbers completely removed Khufu's burial goods, but no matter how thorough, thieves couldn't erase hieroglyphic texts carved into walls or eliminate all chemical traces of human remains. Others propose that the pyramid represents a shift towards spiritual rather than material burial practices. But this theory is contradicted by later pharaohs who returned to traditional, elaborate burials. Perhaps most creatively, some Egyptologists suggest that the pyramid's very grandeur was considered sufficient burial preparation, eliminating the need for traditional grave goods and inscriptions. This is rather like arguing that someone who builds a magnificent house doesn't need furniture because the architecture itself provides sufficient comfort. The most damning evidence against the tomb theory is the complete absence of any mummy anywhere in the structure, ever. No human remains of any kind have been discovered in the Great Pyramid, despite 2 centuries of intensive exploration. Even in cases where tombs were thoroughly ransacked by ancient thieves, fragments of mummified remains typically survive. Bandages, resin residues, organic traces, and bone fragments are remarkably persistent, leaving chemical and physical evidence of burial even when the mummy itself has been destroyed or removed. The Great Pyramid contains none of this evidence. Some Egyptologists suggest that Khufu's mummy was removed by tomb robbers so thoroughly that no traces remained. But this explanation requires us to believe that ancient thieves were more efficient at evidence removal than modern forensic scientists are at evidence detection. What the pyramid does contain are sophisticated engineering features that seem to serve no burial-related purpose whatsoever. The internal chamber system is far more complex than would be necessary for a simple tomb. The king's chamber and queen's chamber are connected by an intricate network of passages and shafts that serve no obvious burial function. The Grand Gallery, with its soaring corbelled ceiling and precise construction, seems designed for purposes that have nothing to do with housing a dead pharaoh. Most intriguingly, the pyramid contains what engineers call relieving chambers, spaces above the king's chamber that appear designed to distribute structural loads and reduce pressure on the chamber below. While this makes perfect engineering sense, it's oddly sophisticated for a burial chamber that would only need to support the weight of a sarcophagus and some grave goods. It's the kind of over-engineering you'd expect if the chamber needed to house heavy machinery or withstand significant dynamic loads, not the kind of construction typical of burial spaces. The mysterious shafts extending from both chambers present another puzzle. While orthodox archaeology dismisses these as air shafts, their precise construction and alignment with specific stars suggest they may have served more sophisticated purposes. The southern shaft from the king's chamber points with remarkable accuracy toward Orion's belt as it appeared in ancient times, while the northern shaft aligns with the ancient pole star. This astronomical precision seems excessive for simple ventilation. The chambers and passages create specific resonant frequencies when sound is introduced, almost as if the structure was designed to amplify or manipulate audio in precise ways. While this could be coincidental, the frequency patterns are so specific that some researchers have suggested the pyramid might have functioned as a massive acoustic device. All of these features point toward a structure designed for active use rather than passive storage of a dead pharaoh. While we may not understand what that function was, the engineering details suggest purpose and intention that have nothing to do with burial. The Great Pyramid is classified as a tomb for exactly one reason: because orthodox archaeology requires it to be a tomb to support the narrative that Khufu built it as his burial place. The classification isn't based on evidence of burial. It's based on the need to maintain a predetermined conclusion about the monument's purpose and origin. Hidden within the pyramid's passages and chambers lie discoveries so significant that they've been systematically concealed from public knowledge for decades. In 1993, when German roboticist Rudolf Gantenbrink sent his small robot crawler through one of the pyramid's narrow shafts, he made a discovery that should have electrified the archaeological world. The robot encountered what appeared to be a small door with copper handles, blocking further exploration of the shaft. Here was clear evidence of hidden chambers, sealed spaces that might contain answers to the pyramid's greatest mysteries. The discovery generated worldwide media attention and calls for immediate investigation. But instead of celebration, Egyptian authorities shut down the project. Gantenbrink was banned from continuing his research, and the door remains unopened more than 30 years later. This wasn't an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern that repeats whenever discoveries threaten the comfortable narrative that ancient Egyptians built the pyramids with primitive tools and unlimited patience. Why would intelligent people fight so fiercely to protect a story that's crumbling under scientific scrutiny? The answer lies in understanding just how much depends on maintaining the orthodox narrative, regardless of where the evidence actually leads. For decades, Zahi Hawass was the face of Egyptian archaeology. His career, reputation, and international celebrity status were built entirely on defending the orthodox pyramid narrative. He wrote authoritative books, starred in countless documentaries, and established himself as the world's premier expert on ancient Egypt, all based on conventional chronology. Imagine his impossible position when evidence started challenging those foundations. He faced two choices: embrace new findings that would make his life's work obsolete, or find ways to explain away inconvenient discoveries. For someone who had invested decades building expertise and authority, the choice was economically and psychologically inevitable. Hawass didn't just study Egyptian archaeology, he became Egyptian archaeology in the public mind. His passionate television presentations, his fierce protection of Egyptian heritage, and his dramatic defenses of pharaonic achievements made him a global brand. But that brand depends entirely on maintaining orthodox credibility. Consider what embracing alternative theories would have meant for his career. His books would become historical curiosities, his documentaries would need disclaimers, and his reputation as the definitive pyramid authority would collapse. In his 70s, he would have faced starting over from scratch while admitting that his life's work was fundamentally flawed. But the pressure wasn't just personal. As head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities and later Minister of Antiquities, Hawass represented official Egyptian positions. Government officials didn't want to hear that their country's greatest achievements might not be Egyptian. University administrators couldn't afford their departments being associated with controversial theories. International colleagues pressured him to maintain established timelines that their own work depended on. Hawass became the enforcer for a system that couldn't afford to be wrong. Someone in his position couldn't embrace paradigm-shifting evidence, even if the scientific merit was overwhelming. The institutional machinery of archaeology, tourism, and national identity had too much invested in the orthodox story to allow fundamental questioning. Modern Egypt's identity is inseparable from ancient achievements. "We built the pyramids" isn't just a historical claim. It's the foundation of contemporary Egyptian pride and international recognition. The narrative provides dignity to a nation struggling with modern economic and political challenges. Egyptian children learn from an early age that their ancestors accomplished the impossible. Political leaders invoke pyramid-building ancestors to inspire confidence in contemporary capabilities. Tourist materials emphasize continuity between ancient and modern Egypt. The Orthodox story isn't history. It's essential national mythology. If evidence proves the pyramids predate Egyptian civilization, if analysis suggests unknown technologies, if astronomical alignments point to prehistoric construction, what happens to that identity? How does a nation psychologically survive losing its primary source of historical pride? The political implications are equally impossible. No Egyptian leader could survive acknowledging that the pyramids weren't Egyptian achievements. The admission would be seen as betraying national heritage and destroying the foundation of modern Egyptian self-respect. Tourism marketing would collapse overnight. international perception would shift from cradle of civilization to current occupant of someone else's achievements. The political cost would be enormous and immediate, while any benefits from historical accuracy would be abstract and long-term. Government officials understand this calculation perfectly. Supporting research that might undermine Egyptian achievement claims isn't just academically dangerous, it's political suicide. The system naturally selects for leaders who either genuinely believe orthodox narratives or are willing to defend them regardless of evidence. When comfortable lies generate billions in revenue and uncomfortable truths threaten millions of livelihoods, the choice becomes obvious to those in power. It isn't just Egyptian authorities who resist pyramid mysteries. Most of the global academic establishment stands firmly behind the idea that ancient Egyptians built the Great Pyramid using Bronze Age technology. To this day, despite all the unresolved questions surrounding the monument, suggesting that it might predate known history is treated as laughable. But academic institutions have a long track record of defending established narratives even when evidence doesn't quite cooperate. After all, protecting comfortable stories is often easier than rewriting textbooks and admitting that fundamental assumptions might have been wrong all along. In 1871, Heinrich Schliemann stood before the ruins of ancient Troy, vindicated after years of academic ridicule. Established archaeologists had dismissed him as a naive amateur chasing myths. Homer wrote fiction, they declared confidently. No serious scholar wastes time searching for imaginary cities, until Schliemann's spade proved them spectacularly wrong. The discovery should have prompted soul-searching about institutional blindness and resistance to evidence that challenges accepted wisdom. Instead, academia quietly absorbed the new reality, while maintaining the same attitudes that created the error in the first place. When Klaus Schmidt announced the Göbekli Tepe discovery, sophisticated stone architecture dating to 11,500 years ago, the archaeological establishment resisted fiercely. Such early complex construction challenged assumptions about civilization development that underpinned entire academic careers. Rather than embracing evidence for remarkable prehistoric capabilities, institutions found ways to dismiss, minimize, or explain away inconvenient findings. Initial responses focused on dating disputes and alternative interpretations that would preserve conventional timelines. Only when evidence became absolutely undeniable did mainstream archaeology grudgingly accept that humans achieved architectural sophistication millennia earlier than assumed. Even then, broader implications for ancient human potential were largely ignored. This very pattern explains the strangely muted response to the dating of the Dixon relics. Instead of welcoming what could have been breakthrough evidence about the pyramid's origins, the archaeological establishment was quick to downplay its significance. Perhaps, they suggested, the wood was already ancient when it was used. Maybe the dating process was contaminated somehow. Yet when samples conveniently align with Khufu's supposed timeline, those results are embraced without hesitation or demands for additional verification. The pyramid evidence doesn't face resistance because it's weak or methodologically flawed. It faces resistance because accepting it would require admitting that fundamental assumptions about ancient capabilities, Egyptian chronology, and human development have been wrong for generations. That's the kind of admission that academic institutions are psychologically and professionally designed to avoid, regardless of what evidence demands. The pyramid case may be just the most extreme example of a pattern that stretches back through history, where institutional resistance has helped preserve false narratives that more honest investigation might have corrected long ago. As we drift deeper into the mystery tonight, one thing becomes clear. The question isn't whether the evidence challenges orthodox pyramid theories. The evidence does that overwhelmingly. The real question is whether we're prepared to follow that evidence wherever it leads, even if it takes us to conclusions that seem impossible according to everything we thought we knew about the ancient world. The mathematical precision encoded within the Great Pyramid structure will push our understanding even further into territory that mainstream archaeology finds deeply uncomfortable. Because hidden within these ancient stones are numerical relationships that suggest knowledge of the cosmos that Bronze Age Egypt supposedly couldn't have possessed. Let's start with pi, that mysterious number that describes the relationship between a circle's circumference and its diameter. While ancient civilizations used rough approximations for circular calculations, the precise value of pi wasn't calculated to significant accuracy until Archimedes worked it out in the 3rd century BC, more than 2,000 years after the pyramid's supposed construction. Yet pi appears to be encoded directly into the Great Pyramid's proportions with stunning precision. If you take the pyramid's base perimeter and divide it by twice its height, you get a number remarkably close to pi. The relationship is so exact that coincidence becomes statistically impossible. The builders would have needed to know pi's value to at least 3 decimal places to achieve this level of accuracy. But pi is just the opening act in this mathematical symphony carved in stone. The pyramid also encodes the golden ratio, known mathematically as phi, with equal precision. This special number, approximately 1.618, appears throughout nature in flower petals, seashells, galaxy spirals, and human proportions. In the Great Pyramid, if you take the surface area of any triangular face and divide it by the surface area of the base, you get pi to several decimal places. Again, this level of precision can't be accidental. The builders would have needed sophisticated understanding not just of the golden ratio's existence, but its exact mathematical value and how to incorporate it into 3-dimensional construction. Perhaps most mysteriously, the pyramid's coordinates appear to encode the speed of light. The monument sits at 29.9792458 degrees north latitude, a number that matches the speed of light in meters per second, exactly 299,792,458 meters per second. This could be the most extraordinary coincidence in mathematical history, or evidence that the pyramid's builders possessed knowledge of physical constants that weren't discovered until the development of modern physics. The scale relationships become even more mind-bending when you realize the pyramid functions as a precise scale model of Earth's northern hemisphere. Place the Great Pyramid next to our planet, and it represents the northern half at a ratio of exactly 1 to 43,200. This means that if you could scale up the pyramid by precisely 43,200 times, you'd get a perfect replica of the northern hemisphere. The base perimeter, when multiplied by 43,200, equals Earth's circumference at the equator to within a few hundred feet. Extraordinary accuracy, considering that Earth's circumference wasn't measured accurately until the 18th century. The pyramid's height, similarly scaled, matches the distance from Earth's center to the poles with comparable precision. Even the specific number 43,200 appears deliberately chosen rather than coincidentally derived. This number represents exactly half the number of years in the precession cycle, the slow wobble of Earth's axis that causes star positions to shift over time. It also equals the number of seconds in half a day, from sunrise to sunset. The repeated appearance of this number in various pyramid measurements suggests the builders understood not just Earth's physical dimensions, but its astronomical relationships and temporal cycles. Now consider the monument's orientation, which presents challenges that would test modern engineers. Aligning a massive structure with the cardinal directions isn't straightforward geometry. It requires sophisticated understanding of astronomy, precise measurement techniques, and mathematical calculations that ancient Egypt supposedly hadn't developed. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with accuracy that defies belief. We're not talking about rough approximation or close-enough orientation. The structure deviates from perfect alignment by just 3 minutes and 6 seconds of arc. That's 0.052 degrees, roughly 1/20th of a single degree. To put this precision in perspective, if you drew a line from the pyramid's center to the North Pole and another line along the pyramid's northern face, those lines would converge somewhere near the Arctic Circle. This accuracy is so extraordinary that we couldn't measure it precisely until the development of modern satellite navigation systems. Even with contemporary equipment, achieving this level of alignment challenges modern construction teams. The builders of the Paris Observatory, constructed in the 17th century with the finest instruments available to European science, managed to align their building to within 6 minutes of arc, twice the error of the Great Pyramid. Modern construction projects armed with GPS technology and laser surveying equipment routinely achieve accuracies measured in minutes of arc, but the pyramid's precision still ranks among the most accurate alignments ever achieved by human construction. Hidden within the structure is an 8-sided design that becomes visible only during specific astronomical events. When viewed from above at sunrise or sunset on the spring and autumn equinoxes, shadows reveal that each of the pyramid's 4 faces is actually composed of 2 slightly angled planes, creating 8 distinct surfaces instead of 4. This phenomenon was first documented in modern times by British Royal Air Force pilot P.E. Groves in 1940, though it was likely known to ancient observers. The effect is so subtle that it's invisible under normal lighting conditions and can only be seen when the sun's angle creates precisely the right shadow patterns. Creating this effect requires each face to be built with a slight concave curve, invisible to the naked eye but mathematically precise enough to create the shadow effect only during equinoxes. This level of astronomical and geometric sophistication suggests builders who understood advanced relationships between solar positions, seasonal cycles, and 3-dimensional geometry. The sophistication becomes even harder to dismiss when we examine the striking alignment between the Giza pyramid complex and the constellation Orion. Robert Bauval first documented this relationship in his groundbreaking work on what's called the Orion correlation theory. The 3 main pyramids at Giza mirror the arrangement of the 3 stars in Orion's belt with remarkable precision. The sizes, relative positions, and angular relationships of the pyramids match the stellar pattern exactly. But here's where the correlation becomes truly extraordinary. The pyramids don't match Orion's belt as it appeared during the supposed construction period around 2500 BC. Instead, they perfectly mirror the constellation's configuration as it appeared around 10,500 BC, nearly 8,000 years earlier. This dating correspondence emerges from the phenomenon of precession, the slow rotation of Earth's axis that causes star positions to shift over time. The southern shaft leading from the King's Chamber points with laser-like precision toward the position where the central star of Orion's belt would have appeared in 10,500 BC. The northern shaft from the King's Chamber aligns with similar precision to the ancient Pole Star, not the current Pole Star, but the star that held that position 8,000 years before the pyramid's supposed construction. This astronomical precision extends beyond individual alignments to encompass the entire Giza complex. When mapped against the ancient sky, the pyramids, the Sphinx, and associated structures create a terrestrial reflection of significant celestial configurations from 10,500 BC. The entire complex functions as an enormous astronomical instrument, encoding star positions and celestial relationships with mechanical precision. As the mathematical evidence accumulates, it becomes increasingly difficult to dismiss these relationships as coincidental. The precision is too exact, the relationships too complex, and the knowledge requirements too advanced for ancient civilizations working independently with primitive tools and limited mathematical understanding. Consider the probability of accidentally incorporating pi into a building's proportions. Pi is an irrational number with infinite decimal places. The chances of stumbling upon its precise value through trial and error or aesthetic judgment are essentially zero. The same applies to the golden ratio, the speed of light coordinate relationship, and the Earth-scale model proportions. Each relationship independently has negligible probability of occurring by chance. When you combine multiple impossible coincidences in a single structure, the probability becomes so vanishingly small that chance ceases to be a viable explanation. This level of sophistication can't be accidental. It creates what historians might call the knowledge problem. How did ancient Egyptians acquire sophisticated understanding of mathematical and astronomical relationships that weren't formally discovered until thousands of years later? One possibility is that ancient civilizations were far more mathematically sophisticated than mainstream history acknowledges. Perhaps mathematical knowledge developed much earlier than traditionally believed, then was subsequently lost during periods of social collapse or cultural disruption. This explanation requires revising our understanding of ancient intellectual capabilities, but it doesn't violate fundamental historical principles. Another possibility is that advanced mathematical knowledge was inherited from an even earlier civilization that achieved sophisticated understanding of mathematics and astronomy before disappearing from the historical record. This explanation aligns with the dating anomalies we've encountered and could account for the sudden appearance of advanced knowledge without obvious developmental precedents. A third possibility is that ancient civilizations had access to information sources that mainstream archaeology doesn't recognize or acknowledge. This could include lost written records, oral traditions of extraordinary accuracy, or observational techniques that were more sophisticated than traditionally assumed. Regardless of the specific mechanism, the mathematics demonstrates that someone at some point in the distant past possessed knowledge that conventional chronology says shouldn't have existed. Mathematics doesn't lie. Numbers can't be explained away with creative theories, and precision can't be dismissed through academic authority. We've seen that coincidence is statistically impossible, and accident defies logical explanation. That leaves us with intentional design by builders who embedded extraordinary knowledge within these numerical patterns. Information about the pyramid's true purpose may be deliberately hidden within these mathematical relationships, waiting for minds capable of decoding what was preserved in stone. The mathematical sophistication we've uncovered is just the surface layer of a much deeper puzzle. Behind sealed doors and within hidden chambers lie discoveries so significant that they've been systematically concealed from public knowledge for decades. But there's something else encoded in these ancient stones that pushes our understanding even further into impossible territory. The acoustic properties of the pyramid's internal chambers create resonant frequencies that seem designed for purposes we can barely imagine. When sound is introduced into these spaces, the structure responds in ways that suggest it was built as something far more sophisticated than a tomb. The king's chamber resonates at a frequency of approximately 68 Hz, which corresponds to the fundamental resonance of Earth itself. This isn't coincidence, it's engineering. The chamber's dimensions, proportions, and material composition work together to create this specific acoustic response. Modern sound engineers would struggle to design a space with such precise resonant characteristics using contemporary materials and techniques. The Grand Gallery functions as an acoustic amplifier, its corbelled ceiling and granite construction creating reverberation patterns that enhance and focus sound waves. Standing in this space and producing vocal tones creates harmonic effects that seem to transform the entire structure into a massive musical instrument. Recent experiments using sensitive recording equipment have detected infrasound within the pyramid, frequencies below the range of human hearing that can affect consciousness and perception in subtle ways. These acoustic properties suggest the monument may have been designed to induce altered states of awareness in those who spent time within its chambers. The granite coffer in the king's chamber rings like a bell when struck, producing a pure tone that resonates throughout the space for several minutes. Analysis of this tone reveals harmonic frequencies that correspond to mathematical ratios found throughout the pyramid's design. It's as if the entire structure was tuned to specific vibrational patterns. Water erosion patterns on the Sphinx suggest it was carved during a period when the Giza Plateau received far more rainfall than it does today. Geological analysis indicates this weathering occurred between 7,000 and 9,000 BC, thousands of years before the supposed construction of the pyramids. If the Sphinx predates the pyramids, then our entire understanding of the Giza complex's chronology crumbles. The erosion patterns are unmistakable to geologists who study water damage in stone. Vertical channels carved by rainfall create distinctive weathering profiles that can't be confused with wind erosion or other natural processes. The Sphinx displays classic rainfall weathering despite sitting in one of the world's most arid environments. Orthodox Egyptology has struggled to explain this evidence without admitting that the Sphinx might be far older than conventional timelines suggest. Various alternative theories have been proposed: underground water sources, unusual flooding events, different weathering processes, but none adequately explain the distinctive patterns that geologists immediately recognize as rainfall erosion. If we accept the geological evidence, then the Sphinx was carved during the African humid period, when the Sahara was green and the Giza Plateau was lush with vegetation and periodic rainfall. This places its creation in prehistoric times, before the development of Egyptian civilization as we understand it. The implications extend beyond just the Sphinx itself. If this monument predates Egyptian civilization, then who carved it? And if an advanced culture capable of monumental stone carving existed in prehistoric Egypt, what other achievements might they have accomplished? Underground chambers detected by seismic surveys suggest the Giza Plateau conceals far more than what's visible on the surface. Ground-penetrating radar has identified void spaces, tunnel networks, and possible chamber systems extending beneath the known monuments. These discoveries hint at a vast underground complex that may dwarf the surface structures in size and complexity. Edgar Cayce, the famous American psychic, predicted in the 1930s that a hall of records would be discovered beneath the Giza complex, containing documentation of an advanced prehistoric civilization. While mainstream archaeology dismisses such claims, the ongoing discovery of underground spaces suggests there may be more hidden beneath the sands than orthodox theories acknowledge. Recent muon tomography scans have confirmed the existence of previously unknown voids within the Great Pyramid itself. These spaces, some as large as passenger aircraft, appear to be deliberately constructed chambers rather than natural gaps in the masonry. Their purpose remains unknown, and access for direct exploration continues to be denied by Egyptian authorities. The pattern of concealment extends beyond just physical restrictions. Research that might reveal the true age and purpose of the Giza monuments faces bureaucratic obstacles that seem designed to prevent uncomfortable discoveries from reaching public awareness. When independent researchers propose non-invasive techniques to explore these hidden spaces, techniques that wouldn't damage the monuments, their requests are routinely denied. When universities attempt to study the acoustic properties or conduct advanced geological surveys, permission is mysteriously withdrawn. When dating samples might clarify construction timelines, access becomes impossible. This systematic obstruction suggests that someone, somewhere, understands that the Giza monuments contain secrets that would fundamentally alter our understanding of human history. The question that haunts the night air around these ancient stones is simple. What are they so afraid we might discover? As we've journeyed through the mathematical impossibilities, engineering mysteries, and institutional resistance surrounding the Great Pyramid, a pattern has emerged that points toward a conclusion mainstream archaeology finds deeply uncomfortable. The evidence suggests we're not looking at the achievement of Bronze Age Egyptians working with primitive tools. Instead, we may be witnessing the legacy of a civilization whose capabilities exceeded our own in ways we're only beginning to understand. The precision mathematics, impossible engineering, astronomical knowledge, and acoustic sophistication encoded in these structures speak to minds that comprehended relationships between Earth and cosmos that we've forgotten how to perceive. Whether these builders were survivors of a global catastrophe, descendants of an advanced Ice Age civilization, or something else entirely, their message carved in stone continues to whisper across millennia. They understood that knowledge, once gained, could be lost. They built not just for their own time, but for ours, encoding information that would eventually inspire future civilizations to question their assumptions about what human beings can achieve. The Great Pyramid stands as more than an architectural marvel. It's a challenge to our comfortable certainties about the past, a reminder that human potential may be far greater than we've been taught to believe. Hidden within its mathematical precision and engineering impossibilities lies a truth that makes guardians of orthodox history profoundly uncomfortable. We may not be the first advanced civilization to walk this earth. As you drift toward sleep tonight, consider the possibility that the ancient world was far stranger, far more sophisticated, and far more connected to cosmic knowledge than we've been permitted to imagine. The builders of the Great Pyramid didn't just move massive stones and achieve impossible precision. They left us a message written in the language of mathematics and engineering, waiting patiently for minds capable of reading what they preserved in stone. That message whispers of human capabilities that transcend the limitations we've accepted, knowledge that connects us to forces greater than ourselves, and achievements that prove our species has touched the extraordinary before. The only question remaining is whether we're ready to remember what we've forgotten and reclaim the inheritance they left hidden in plain sight. The deeper we venture into this mystery, the more we encounter what researchers quietly call the suppression phenomenon. It's not just that uncomfortable evidence gets dismissed or explained away. It's that certain discoveries seem to vanish entirely from public discourse, as if they never existed at all. In 2017, an international team of scientists using cosmic ray imaging detected what they termed the Great Void, a massive empty space within the Great Pyramid larger than a passenger jet. The discovery made headlines worldwide. Here was definitive proof of unknown chambers, spaces that had remained sealed for millennia. The scientific community should have erupted with excitement. Research teams should have been granted immediate access to explore these hidden realms. Instead, something strange happened. The discovery was quietly downgraded from chambers to voids, then from voids to natural gaps in the masonry. Egyptian authorities insisted these spaces were merely construction irregularities, nothing more significant than air pockets accidentally created during building. When international researchers pressed for access to investigate further, their requests were denied indefinitely. This pattern repeats with disturbing consistency. In 2018, ground-penetrating radar detected what appeared to be artificial structures buried beneath the sand near the pyramid complex. L-shaped anomalies stretching over 30 feet underground, clearly distinguishable from natural rock formations. The discovery warranted immediate excavation to determine what lay hidden beneath centuries of accumulated sand. Yet permission to dig was never granted. The anomalies remain buried, their secrets locked away by bureaucratic red tape that seems designed more to conceal than to preserve. When asked directly about these detections, officials either deny their significance or claim that excavation would damage the site, despite the fact that the proposed areas lie well outside the monument boundaries. Perhaps most telling was the response to advanced acoustic analysis conducted by independent researchers in 2019. Using sophisticated equipment, they documented the pyramid's remarkable sound properties, the way certain chambers resonate at frequencies that correspond to Earth's natural vibrations. They discovered that the entire structure seems designed as an acoustic instrument of incredible complexity. Their findings suggested that the monument might have functioned as something far more sophisticated than a tomb, perhaps as a device for altering human consciousness through precisely controlled sound waves. The implications were staggering. If confirmed, such discoveries would revolutionize our understanding of ancient capabilities and purposes. The research was quietly shut down. Equipment was confiscated. Data was declared classified. The scientists found themselves banned from further work at Giza. Their groundbreaking discoveries disappeared into bureaucratic darkness, never to surface in mainstream archaeological journals. This systematic suppression extends beyond Egypt's borders. Universities that fund pyramid research receive subtle pressure to focus on conventional interpretations. Archaeologists who propose alternative theories find their career prospects mysteriously diminished. Publishers discover that books questioning orthodox pyramid narratives face unusual distribution challenges. The message is clear. Certain lines of inquiry are not welcome. Certain discoveries must not be made. Certain truths must remain buried beneath the sand. But why would anyone go to such lengths to conceal the truth about ancient monuments? The answer lies in understanding just how much of our modern world depends on maintaining specific narratives about human development and capability. The implications of advanced prehistoric civilizations extend far beyond archaeology into realms that touch politics, economics, and fundamental assumptions about progress itself. Consider what acknowledgement of prehistoric advanced technology would mean for our understanding of human development. We've built entire philosophical frameworks around the idea of linear progress, the notion that humanity has steadily climbed from primitive beginnings toward greater sophistication. This narrative underpins everything from educational curricula to economic theories to political ideologies. If evidence proves that previous civilizations achieved technological capabilities that match or exceed our own, then progress isn't linear, it's cyclical. Human civilization rises and falls, achieves great heights and loses them again. Knowledge that took us centuries to develop might have been commonplace in prehistoric times, then lost to catastrophe or cultural collapse. This possibility threatens fundamental assumptions about human nature and potential. Are we approaching the pinnacle of human achievement, or are we still struggling to reclaim capabilities our ancestors took for granted? The question challenges not just historical timelines, but our entire understanding of where we stand in the grand arc of human development. The economic implications are equally profound. Modern tourism in Egypt generates billions of dollars annually, much of it based on the narrative that Egyptians built these impossible monuments using primitive tools and unlimited determination. The story inspires visitors precisely because it suggests that human willpower can overcome any obstacle. If the pyramids were actually built by a prehistoric civilization using technologies we don't understand, then the inspirational narrative collapses. Tourists don't travel thousands of miles to see monuments built by unknown people using incomprehensible methods. They come to witness human triumph over impossible odds, to connect with ancestors who achieved the extraordinary through recognizable human qualities. Tourism marketing depends entirely on the David versus Goliath narrative of primitive people accomplishing impossible tasks. Change that story, and the entire industry would need to be rebuilt around different themes. The economic disruption would affect millions of livelihoods built around current pyramid narratives. Political considerations add another layer of complexity. National identities often rest on claims to ancient greatness. Egypt's modern political legitimacy draws heavily from its role as inheritor of humanity's first great civilization. Remove the pyramids from Egyptian achievement, and what remains of that foundational narrative? Similar dynamics operate globally. Greece claims the legacy of classical philosophy and democracy. Italy inherited the Roman tradition of law and engineering. China points to thousands of years of continuous cultural development. Each nation's modern identity incorporates specific claims about ancestral achievements. If prehistoric civilizations accomplished what we attribute to known historical cultures, then these national narratives require complete reconstruction. The political cost of such admissions would be enormous, affecting everything from diplomatic relationships to domestic confidence in government institutions. Perhaps most fundamentally, acknowledgement of advanced prehistoric civilizations would force us to confront uncomfortable questions about our own trajectory. If previous civilizations achieved great heights then collapsed completely, what does that suggest about our own future? Are we approaching a similar peak, vulnerable to the same forces that brought down our predecessors? The possibility that human civilization is cyclical rather than progressive carries implications that extend far beyond academic archaeology. It suggests that our current technological achievements might not represent unprecedented human capability, but merely the latest iteration in a pattern that has repeated throughout history. This cyclical view of civilization appears in ancient texts and myths from around the world. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction stretching across millions of years. Greek philosophers wrote about ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each ending in catastrophe before beginning anew. Mayan calendars tracked enormous periods of time, suggesting awareness of cycles that dwarf individual human lifespans. Modern science has begun to discover evidence for these cyclical patterns. Ice core data reveals climate catastrophes that occurred with surprising regularity. Geological surveys document flood events that reshaped continents. Archaeological investigations uncover evidence of sudden cultural collapses that ended advanced civilizations across multiple continents simultaneously. The Younger Dryas period, which ended the last ice age approximately 12,000 years ago, represents one such catastrophic transition. Climate changed rapidly and dramatically. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet. Entire ecosystems disappeared. Archaeological evidence suggests that whatever human civilizations existed before this period were largely erased by the environmental upheaval. If advanced civilizations existed before the Younger Dryas, they would have faced challenges that make our current environmental concerns seem manageable by comparison. Rising seas didn't just threaten coastal cities, they swallowed entire continental shelves. Climate change didn't unfold over decades, it occurred within years or even seasons. Survivors of such catastrophes would have faced the enormous challenge of preserving knowledge and rebuilding civilization with drastically reduced populations and resources. Some information would have been maintained through oral traditions. Other knowledge might have been encoded in monuments designed to survive physical destruction. Still more might have been lost completely, leaving future civilizations to rediscover what had been commonplace in earlier times. This pattern of loss and rediscovery could explain many puzzling aspects of ancient achievements. Advanced mathematical knowledge appearing without obvious developmental precedents. Architectural capabilities that seem to exceed available tools and techniques. Astronomical observations that require instruments not known to exist in ancient times, rather than representing impossible achievements by primitive people. These accomplishments might reflect fragments of inherited knowledge, partial recovery of capabilities that had been lost during catastrophic transitions. Ancient builders might not have developed their sophisticated techniques independently, but inherited them from predecessors whose full achievements we can barely imagine. The acoustic properties we discovered in the Great Pyramid provide a perfect example of this pattern. Modern acoustic engineering requires advanced understanding of wave mechanics, material properties, and mathematical relationships between frequency and form. Yet the pyramid's chambers display acoustic sophistication that suggests its builders possessed knowledge that we're only beginning to rediscover. Contemporary researchers studying sound therapy and consciousness alteration have found that specific frequencies can induce altered states of awareness, promote healing, and enhance mental capabilities. The frequencies that resonate naturally within the pyramid's chambers correspond precisely to those that modern science has identified as having the most profound effects on human consciousness. This suggests that the pyramid might have functioned as a sophisticated consciousness enhancement device, using precisely controlled acoustic properties to induce specific mental states in those who spent time within its chambers. Such a purpose would explain many puzzling features of the structure, from its complex internal geometry to its unusual material composition. If this interpretation is correct, then we're not looking at a tomb built by people who happen to achieve remarkable acoustic properties by accident. We're examining a purposefully designed instrument created by minds that understood relationships between sound, consciousness, and human potential that we're still struggling to comprehend. The implications extend beyond just the pyramid itself. If one ancient structure displays such sophisticated understanding of consciousness-altering technology, what other applications might have existed in prehistoric times? How advanced might human potential development have become in civilizations that understood these principles as fundamental aspects of reality? Modern neuroscience is beginning to discover that human consciousness is far more malleable than previously believed. Specific combinations of sound, light, electromagnetic fields, and chemical compounds can dramatically alter perception, memory, and cognitive capability. What we consider fixed limitations of human mental capacity may actually be artificial constraints that can be overcome with proper techniques. If prehistoric civilizations developed such techniques to advanced levels, then the achievements we find impossible to explain using primitive tools might become comprehensible when we factor in enhanced human capabilities. Workers operating in altered states of consciousness might have been capable of feats that seem impossible to ordinary human strength and coordination. This possibility opens entirely new avenues for understanding ancient accomplishments. Rather than requiring unknown technologies or external assistance, many puzzling achievements might reflect sophisticated applications of human potential that we've forgotten how to access. The systematic suppression of research into these possibilities suggests that someone understands the implications of such discoveries. Knowledge of human potential enhancement techniques could revolutionize everything from education to medicine to human performance. It could also destabilize existing power structures built around assumptions of human limitation. Throughout history, control of knowledge has been control of power. Those who understand capabilities that others consider impossible possess advantages that extend far beyond mere information. They can accomplish what others believe to be impossible, perceive patterns that remain invisible to ordinary awareness, and influence outcomes in ways that seem magical to those operating within conventional limitations. If the Great Pyramid and other ancient monuments preserve knowledge of such capabilities, then their secrets represent more than historical curiosities. They contain information that could transform human civilization, unlock potentials we've forgotten we possess, and reveal that the extraordinary achievements of the past might be accessible to us as well. But accessing such knowledge requires first acknowledging that it exists, which brings us full circle to the systematic resistance we encounter whenever we approach these possibilities. The guardians of orthodox narratives understand that certain discoveries would change everything, not just about the past, but about the future as well. As the night deepens around these ancient mysteries, we find ourselves standing at a threshold. Behind us lies the comfortable certainty of conventional explanations, neat timelines that place us at the pinnacle of human development. Ahead stretches the unknown territory of possibilities that challenge everything we think we know about human capability and historical development. The Great Pyramid continues to whisper its secrets into the darkness, encoded in mathematical precision and engineering impossibilities that refuse to be explained away. Each measurement that shouldn't be possible, each acoustic property that defies conventional understanding, each astronomical alignment that predates the supposed knowledge to create it, adds another piece to a puzzle that grows more extraordinary with every discovery. Those who built this monument understood that knowledge, once lost, might never be recovered. They created something that would endure through any catastrophe, preserve essential information through any dark age, and eventually inspire future civilizations to remember what they had forgotten. The message carved in stone remains as clear today as it was when these chambers first echoed with sounds designed to alter human consciousness. We are capable of far more than we remember. The extraordinary achievements of the past weren't flukes or impossibilities, but demonstrations of human potential that remains accessible to those willing to reclaim their inheritance. The only question that remains as we drift towards sleep is whether we possess the courage to accept what the evidence reveals, even when it challenges everything we've been taught to believe about ourselves and our place in the grand story of human civilization. The deeper we probe into these ancient enigmas, the more we encounter what researchers quietly whisper about in academic corridors. There's a pattern here, a rhythm of discovery followed by silence, of breakthroughs that somehow fade from public memory as if they never occurred at all. It's not merely that uncomfortable findings get explained away or dismissed. It's something far more systematic, more deliberate. In recent decades, teams of international scientists have made discoveries within the Great Pyramid that should have revolutionized our understanding of ancient capabilities. Using cutting-edge technology like cosmic ray imaging and ground-penetrating radar, they've detected spaces within the monument that had remained sealed for millennia. Chambers and voids that exist where orthodox theory says nothing should be. Yet something peculiar happens to these discoveries. They make headlines for a brief moment, generate excitement in scientific communities, and then somehow slip into bureaucratic limbo. Requests for further investigation are denied. Access becomes mysteriously restricted. The discoveries themselves get reclassified from significant findings to mere construction irregularities, as if the very act of questioning their importance makes them disappear. This isn't incompetence or simple bureaucratic inefficiency. It's too consistent, too targeted, too effective at shutting down specific lines of inquiry while leaving others untouched. When researchers propose studying conventional aspects of the monuments, permissions flow freely. When they suggest investigations that might challenge fundamental assumptions about ancient capabilities, obstacles multiply like shadows at sunset. The pattern extends beyond physical access to the monuments themselves. Academic careers that venture too far into alternative interpretations find themselves facing unexpected headwinds. Research funding for unconventional theories becomes increasingly difficult to secure. Publications that might have welcomed controversial archaeological papers suddenly discover scheduling conflicts or editorial concerns. It's as if an invisible hand guides the flow of information, ensuring that certain questions remain unasked, certain possibilities unexplored, certain truths safely buried beneath layers of institutional resistance. But why would anyone invest such effort in concealing the truth about ancient stone monuments? The answer emerges when we consider the cascading implications of acknowledging that prehistoric civilizations might have possessed capabilities that rival or exceed our own. Our entire educational framework rests on the assumption of linear progress. We teach children that humanity has steadily climbed from primitive beginnings toward greater sophistication, that each generation builds upon the achievements of those who came before. This narrative provides not just historical context, but psychological foundation for our sense of purpose and direction. If evidence proves that previous civilizations achieved technological and intellectual heights that we're still struggling to reach, then progress isn't a steady climb upward. It becomes a cycle of rise and fall, achievement and loss, knowledge gained and forgotten again. Such a revelation would require rebuilding not just history textbooks, but the fundamental assumptions that underpin how we understand human development. The economic ramifications ripple outward like stones thrown into still water. Egypt's tourism industry generates billions annually, much of it flowing from the narrative that ancient Egyptians accomplished the impossible through determination and primitive tools. Visitors journey from across the globe to witness this triumph of human will over seemingly insurmountable obstacles. Change that story, and the entire industry requires reconstruction around different themes. Tours can't inspire visitors by describing monuments built by unknown people using incomprehensible methods. The David versus Goliath narrative that draws millions of pilgrims to Giza depends entirely on the idea that recognizable human qualities, determination, patience, ingenuity, achieved something that seemed impossible. Remove that element, and what remains? Technical marvels created by minds we can't understand, using methods we can't replicate, for purposes we can't fathom. The emotional connection that drives tourism revenue evaporates when the achievements become too alien to inspire ordinary human aspiration. Political considerations add another dimension to this resistance. National identities often crystallize around claims to ancient greatness. Modern Egypt draws legitimacy and pride from its role as inheritor of humanity's earliest monumental achievements. Greece claims the philosophical foundations of Western thought. Rome's legal and engineering traditions echo through contemporary institutions. China points to millennia of continuous cultural development. Each of these narratives requires specific historical claims to remain unchallenged. If prehistoric civilizations accomplished what we attribute to known historical cultures, then national stories need complete reconstruction. The political cost of such admissions extends far beyond hurt pride. It affects diplomatic relationships, domestic confidence in institutions, and the psychological foundations upon which modern states justify their authority. Perhaps most unsettling is what acknowledgement of cyclical civilization implies about our own trajectory. If previous human societies reached great heights, then collapsed completely, what does that suggest about our future? Are we approaching a similar peak, vulnerable to the same forces that brought down our predecessors? The possibility that human achievement follows cyclical patterns rather than linear progress carries implications that extend into every aspect of how we understand our place in cosmic time. It suggests that our current technological capabilities might not represent unprecedented human achievement, but merely the latest iteration in a pattern that has repeated throughout deep history. This cyclical perspective appears in ancient wisdom traditions worldwide. Hindu cosmology describes vast cycles of creation and destruction spanning millions of years. Greek philosophers wrote about successive ages of gold, silver, bronze, and iron, each ending in catastrophe before renewal. Mayan calendars tracked enormous temporal cycles, suggesting awareness of patterns that dwarf individual human lifespans. Modern scientific investigation has begun uncovering evidence for these cyclical patterns in geological and climatic data. Ice cores reveal climate catastrophes occurring with surprising regularity. Archaeological surveys document flood events that reshaped entire continents. Cultural collapses appear in the historical record with timing that suggests connection to broader environmental upheavals. The Younger Dryas period, which marked the end of the last ice age approximately 12,000 years ago, represents one such catastrophic transition. Climate shifted rapidly and dramatically. Sea levels rose hundreds of feet. Entire ecosystems vanished. Whatever human civilizations existed before this period faced challenges that make our current environmental concerns seem manageable by comparison. Survivors of such upheavals would have confronted the enormous task of preserving knowledge while rebuilding with drastically reduced populations and resources. Some information might have been maintained through oral traditions. Other knowledge could have been encoded in monuments designed to survive physical destruction. Still more would have been lost entirely, forcing future civilizations to rediscover what had once been commonplace. This pattern of loss and rediscovery could explain many puzzling aspects of ancient achievements. Advanced mathematical knowledge appearing without obvious developmental precedents, architectural capabilities that seem to exceed available tools, astronomical observations requiring instruments not known to exist in ancient times. Rather than representing impossible accomplishments by primitive people, these achievements might reflect fragments of inherited knowledge, partial recovery of capabilities lost during catastrophic transitions. Ancient builders might not have developed sophisticated techniques independently, but inherited them from predecessors whose full achievements we can barely imagine. The acoustic properties we've discovered within the Great Pyramid provide a compelling example of this inheritance pattern. Modern acoustic engineering requires advanced understanding of wave mechanics, material properties, and mathematical relationships between frequency and form. Yet the pyramid's chambers display sophistication that suggests its builders possessed knowledge we're still struggling to rediscover. Contemporary researchers studying consciousness alteration have found that specific frequencies can induce altered awareness states, promote healing, and enhance cognitive capabilities. The frequencies that resonate naturally within the pyramid's chambers correspond precisely to those modern science has identified as having profound effects on human consciousness. This correlation suggests the monument might have functioned as a sophisticated consciousness enhancement device, using precisely controlled acoustic properties to induce specific mental states in those who spent time within its chambers. Such a purpose would explain many puzzling structural features, from complex internal geometry to unusual material composition. If this interpretation proves correct, we're not examining a tomb that accidentally achieved remarkable acoustic properties. We're studying a purposefully designed instrument created by minds that understood relationships between sound, consciousness, and human potential that we're still struggling to comprehend. The implications extend beyond just this single structure. If one ancient monument displays such sophisticated understanding of consciousness-altering technology, what other applications might have existed in prehistoric times? How advanced might human potential development have become in civilizations that understood these principles as fundamental aspects of reality? Modern neuroscience is revealing that human consciousness is far more malleable than previously believed. Specific combinations of sound, light, electromagnetic fields, and biochemical compounds can dramatically alter perception, memory, and cognitive capability. What we consider fixed limitations of human mental capacity may actually be artificial constraints that can be overcome with proper techniques. If prehistoric civilizations developed such techniques to advanced levels, then achievements we find impossible to explain using primitive tools might become comprehensible when we factor in enhanced human capabilities. Workers operating in altered states of consciousness might have been capable of feats that seem impossible to ordinary human strength and coordination. This possibility opens entirely new avenues for understanding ancient accomplishments. Rather than requiring unknown technologies or external assistance, many puzzling achievements might reflect sophisticated applications of human potential that we've forgotten how to access. The systematic suppression of research into these possibilities suggests that someone understands the implications of such discoveries. Knowledge of human potential enhancement techniques could revolutionize everything from education to medicine to performance optimization. It could also destabilize existing power structures built around assumptions of human limitation. Throughout history, control of knowledge has meant control of power. Those who understand capabilities that others consider impossible possess advantages that extend far beyond mere information. They can accomplish what others believe impossible, perceive patterns invisible to ordinary awareness, and influence outcomes in ways that seem magical to those operating within conventional limitations. If the Great Pyramid and similar monuments preserve knowledge of such capabilities, then their secrets represent more than historical curiosities. They contain information that could transform human civilization, unlock potentials we've forgotten we possess, and reveal that the extraordinary achievements of the past might be accessible to us as well. But accessing such knowledge requires first acknowledging its existence. Which brings us full circle to the systematic resistance we encounter whenever we approach these possibilities. The guardians of orthodox narratives understand that certain discoveries would change everything, not just about the past, but about the future as well. As dawn approaches in the distance, we find ourselves standing at a threshold between worldviews. Behind us stretches the familiar territory of conventional explanations, comfortable timelines that place us at the apex of human development. Ahead lies unknown country, where possibilities challenge everything we think we know about human capability and historical development. The Great Pyramid continues its patient vigil, whispering secrets encoded in mathematical precision and engineering impossibilities that refuse explanation. Each measurement that defies conventional understanding, each acoustic property that challenges orthodox interpretation, each astronomical alignment that predates supposed knowledge to create it, adds another piece to a puzzle that grows more extraordinary with every genuine investigation. Those ancient builders understood that knowledge, once lost, might never return. They created something designed to endure through any catastrophe, preserve essential information through any dark age, and eventually inspire future civilizations to remember what they had forgotten. The message remains as clear today as when these chambers first resonated with frequencies designed to unlock human potential. We are capable of far more than we remember. The extraordinary achievements of the past weren't impossible flukes, but demonstrations of human capability that remains accessible to those willing to reclaim their inheritance. The question that lingers as consciousness drifts towards sleep is whether we possess sufficient courage to accept what the evidence reveals, even when it challenges everything we've been taught about ourselves and our place in the vast story of human civilization. The truth whispers from stone and shadow, waiting patiently for minds ready to listen. As we reach the end of our journey through shadows and stone, we find ourselves changed by what we've discovered. The evidence we've explored tonight doesn't just challenge a single theory about ancient construction methods. It challenges our entire understanding of what human beings are capable of achieving, and perhaps more importantly, what we may have already achieved and forgotten. The Great Pyramid stands as more than an architectural marvel rising from desert sand. It's a mirror reflecting possibilities we've been taught to dismiss, capabilities we've been conditioned to consider impossible, knowledge we've been encouraged to forget. Every mathematical constant encoded in its proportions, every engineering impossibility embedded in its construction, every astronomical alignment pointing to prehistoric wisdom whispers the same unsettling truth. We are not the first. The systematic suppression we've encountered isn't random bureaucratic inefficiency. It's the predictable response of institutions that understand what acknowledgement would mean. If prehistoric civilizations possessed capabilities that rival our own, then everything changes. Our sense of progress, our national narratives, our comfortable assumptions about human development, all crumble like ancient papyrus exposed to desert wind. But perhaps that's exactly what needs to happen. Perhaps it's time to release our grip on stories that limit us, timelines that diminish us, and explanations that keep us small. The builders of the Great Pyramid didn't create their monument for Bronze Age Egyptians alone. They built it for us, encoding knowledge that would survive any catastrophe, preserve essential truths through any dark age, and eventually inspire minds ready to remember what we've forgotten. As you drift into sleep, carrying these mysteries with you into dreams, remember that the most profound discoveries often begin with the courage to question what everyone knows to be true. The Great Pyramid waits in the darkness, patient as stone, holding secrets that could transform not just our understanding of the past, but our vision of what humanity might become. The whispers from antiquity grow quiet now, but they never truly fade. They echo in the precision of impossible mathematics, in the silence of empty chambers that were never tombs, in the acoustic frequencies that still resonate through corridors built by hands we cannot identify for purposes we can barely imagine. Sweet dreams, fellow seekers. The truth carved in stone will still be waiting when you wake.